Hello guys, my name is Yara and today I'm going to be explaining the silent words, and I'm going to include in the video some silent words, and I'm going to explain how do you pronounce those words. So I'm going to put a picture in the screen and let's get started. So this is the picture, and we have some rules in the silent letter, and today I'm going to be reading for you some of those rules. So the first rule is that the letter B is always silent after the letter M at the end of the word. And the second rule is letter B is also generally silent before the letter T at the end of a root word. The last rule is that the letter C is silent in the SC word combination, and C is always useless in front of K or the letter Q. Okay, so now I told you the three rules. I'm going to start with a word that includes a silent K in it. So let's start. Okay, so the first word we have here is knee, and you pronounce it as knee and not knee because the K is silent, so you pronounce it as N and double E. And as you can see here, I brought a word that includes a silent K that has an N after them. So all of those words in the silent K pile includes the letter N after them. So the first word we have is knee, and as I said, you pronounce it as knee because the K is silent. Now the second word we have not, and you pronounce it as not because the K is silent, and you pronounce it as N-O-T. It's like the K is not there while you pronounce it, but when you write it, you have to include the K. Okay, so the third word we have is knit, and you pronounce it as N-I-T. The K is silent, obviously. Okay, so the fourth word we have is no, and no, you pronounce it as N-O-W, but you don't pronounce it as now. You pronounce it as no because, yeah, and the K is silent. The fifth word we have is knock. I'm going to put knock in a sentence like, I knocked on my brother's door to wake him up. You pronounce it as N-O-C-K, and the first K is silent. The second K is pronounced. So the sixth word we have is knife, and you pronounce it as N-I-F-E, but when you write it, you have to include the K. So you don't pronounce it as knife, you pronounce it as knife because the K is silent. The seventh word we have is night, and you pronounce it just like night, but when you write it, it's definitely because there's a K, but the K is silent. And the eighth word we have is knack. So the first K is silent, but the second K is not silent. So you pronounce it as N-A-C-K. The ninth word we have is new, and you pronounce it as N-E-W, not knew, because the K is silent. The 10th word we have is knuckle, and the first K is silent. The second, you pronounce the second K, it's not silent. Only the first K is silent. So the last word we have is knob, and you pronounce it as N-O-B, knob, not K-N-O-B, which is knob, and that is wrong. Okay, Next, we have the silent B. So there are a couple of words that has an M before the B, and there are a couple of words as well that has a T after the B. So the first word we have is lamb, and you pronounce it as L-A-M and not L-A-M-B because the B is silent. And the second word we have is thumb. You pronounce it as T-H-U-M, T-H as th and U-M as so thumb. And the third word we have is numb. I'm going to tell you what does the word numb means, but before I tell you, you pronounce it as numb because the B is silent. And numb as an adjective is you feel a part of your body feels deprived of the power of physical sensation. For example, we have a sentence that includes a numb. It says, my feet were numb with cold. And in the verb numb, it means deprived of feeling your responsiveness. And in a sentence, it's the cold had numbed her senses. The fourth word we have is climb, and you pronounce it as C-L-I-M-B. C-L-I-M. You write it as C-L-I-M-B, but you pronounce it as climb and not climb. The sixth word we have here is tomb, and you pronounce it as T-O-M without the B because the B is silent. The seventh word we have is limb, and you pronounce it as L-I-M and not L-I-M-B, but when you write it, you have to include the B, but when you pronounce it, you delete the B. It's silent, so you don't pronounce it. The eighth word we have is crumb, and you pronounce it as C-R-U-M and not C-R-U-M-B, otherwise it's going to be crumb, and that is wrong. So we have some words here, so two words actually, that includes a T after the B, and they are dead. So you don't include the B, you cancel it from the word, but when you write it, you have to include the B. But when you pronounce it, you don't include it. So it's dead. And the last word we have is doubt. It's D-O-U-T when you pronounce it, but when you write it, it's D-O-U-B-T. Okay, so moving on to the letter U. I put some words that includes a silent U, and most of the word includes either an E or an I after them. So, yeah, let's get started. The first word we have is guess, and you don't pronounce the U, you just pronounce it as it's G-E-S-S and not G-U-E-S-S. But when you write it G-U-E-S-S. So the second word we have is guest. You pronounce it as G-E-S-T, guest. The third word we have is guide. And the fourth word we have is guilt. You pronounce it as G-I-L-T and not G-U-I-L-T. The fifth word we have is guiled, and you pronounce it as G-I-L-D. Okay, so disguise, and you pronounce it as D-I-S-G-I-S-E, and not with the U because the U is silent. The seventh word we have is guitar, and you pronounce it as G-I and not G-U-I, so guitar. The eighth word we have is league, and you pronounce it as league without the E, the U, sorry. And the ninth word we have is, okay, moving on to the letter T. And here are some words that includes a silent T. So the first word we have is castle. You don't pronounce the T because it's silent. And as you can see, most of the words includes an L after the T. And there are a couple of words that includes an E after the T. Okay, so moving on to the letter T. Here are some words that includes the silent T. So the first word we have is castle. You pronounce it as C-A-S-L-E because the T is silent. As you can see, there are a couple of words in here that includes an L after the silent T, and there are some words that includes an E after the T. So the second word we have is whistle. The third word we have is wrestle. The fourth word we have is hustle. The fifth word we have is nestle, and we have bristle. For the seventh word we have rustle, and the eighth word jostle. The ninth word is fasten, and the 10th word is listen. And the last word is moisten. It's not moisten, it's moisten. So moving on to the letter H. Here are some words that includes a letter H, a silent H. And as you can see here, all of the words have a C before the silent H. So, like, for example, all of the words, but the first word we have is character, and the second word we have is chemical. The third word we have is chemist. We don't say chemist, we say chemist. The H is silent. The fourth word we have is chlorine. The fifth word we have is core. And the sixth word we have is cholera. The seventh word we have cord. And the eighth word we have chorus. We have Christian. And we have chrome. And the last word we have echo. Echo. So this is how you pronounce the silent letters, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys understood from my explaining. Goodbye.